What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Other Guys on the Badlands Podcast Network. I flubbed that. I'm just going to cut the first 10 seconds of this and do this again. This is what happens when you're hungover from being in Vegas. God damn.
I forgot to ask you before we clicked live here too. You can't hear. I have my TV on, and it's like an
Oh,
old,
okay.
it's a flat screen, but it's older. You can't hear a hum from it, right? I have it on mute.
No. I
Okay.
can't hear anything. Yeah.
All right. All right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'll keep this all one recording and just start over and chop the first 30 seconds. That's fine. All right. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Other Guys on the Badlands Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jake Chatsky, joined as always by my co-host, Paul Kilgallen. Paul, what a miserable primetime experience for the Jets yet again. How you doing? How you feeling?
Not unwell. It's too. It's hard to put last night with the week before. Also, I went to the Chargers game. You went to the Raiders game. Um, two prime time absolute no shows, no touchdowns. I happened to go into both of them like feeling pretty good. Like I said in the pod last week when we recorded, like my confidence against the Chargers had waned a little bit over the course of that week, and I wasn't feeling as like we were going to beat them as badly as I felt earlier in the week, but I still felt pretty good. And then last night, before that game starts, gun to my head, I'm like, we're gonna bully the Raiders. We're gonna push them around. The afterburn from McDaniels leaving is gone, and we're gonna expose them for what they are, which is a bad team with an inexperienced coach. And it didn't happen, and it was tough to swallow. And I just sat there most of that game last night, just in silence, just kind of staring at the television, but had the old 10,000-mile gaze on my face. And as far as the game itself, I find myself almost like pleading with Zach to like, dude, like your career's on life support, like do something, help yourself. And it was the same thing that I was doing with Darnold at the end of like, dude, like this is over for you unless you do something right here. And last night definitely felt like one of those games for Zach where it was like, you have to do something. You have to do something sooner. You're not going to be able to hold off this wave much longer. And I know a lot of people don't want to hold off the wave any longer, but it just felt like such a big spot. And as then the interception happens, and it felt predictable. It felt totally predictable. There's the same three players that we've been talking about nonstop, like Carter, Lazard, CJ Uzama, like shoot him to the moon, done. Hackett, same deal. And it feels like we're talking about the same stuff every week, Jake. It's getting old.
Yeah, it's getting to feel like the definition of insanity for sure. I like you said, I was at the game, and it just sort of felt. I don't even think like obviously the interception was one thing too, but the second that Josh Jacobs scored the touchdown, or Michael Mayer,
Yeah.
excuse me, the second that Michael Mayer scored the touchdown and Josh Jacobs ripped off that long run to set it up, like the game felt over. And
Yep.
I even was like, that'll do it because this team simply cannot score touchdowns, and it's getting old to watch. And then after the game, I did this to myself, but after the game, obviously decked out in Jets gear at the stadium, we're walking on the bridge, and there's Raiders fans just yelling like, 2 weeks in a row, you guys bought flights from New York, and you're fucking losers. You're just losers. And there's nothing you could do. You're just walking back in absolute silence, like,
Head down.
yeah,
Don't say a word.
yeah. Like, no, what one guy even said to him, one guy goes, you guys beat the Jets. And I was like, dude, I mean, what are we doing here? Like, just hang your head in silence and just take it. And yeah, I think watching it in person, like it felt like such a good spot for the Jets. Cause like you said, the hype had, sort of could have worn off from the Antonio Pierce, like interim ride that they were on against the Giants. And you got a rookie quarterback going up against a defense that, for all intents and purposes, did their job. Like we'll get to this later, but you can't expect them to pitch a perfect game every single game. And 16, like I just saw a stat from Football Outsiders that I'll get the credit right, but there are two teams in NFL history who have had a defensive performance so far. It's us with certain metrics. It's us and the 2000 Baltimore Ravens.
Mm.
Like, and just when you see stats like that, you realize, like, yeah, were they absolutely 100% perfect all game? No, but none of this is on the defense's fault. The offense is just abysmal to watch. And the number one thing I think coming out of that game was the penalties. And obviously it wiped points off the board. It led to points being scored from the Raiders. It canceled some key defensive stops. And at this point, I'm starting to wonder if I think it not only is a player's problem, but like it's a coaching problem. Is it not?
Well, it's interesting because like I think the gut feeling when you see penalties, like you go to the classics, right? This is an undisciplined team, blah blah blah. Like I think the gut is to pin it on the coaching. And I was watching Connor and the crew on the post game last night, and Bart and Willie were essentially saying the opposite. They were like, "What? Sal's not out there getting flagged, right? Like what do we expect him to do?" And I think a lot of it from the fans comes from, Saleh is a guy that's never going to embarrass a player publicly. Like he's never going to scream his head off at somebody on the sideline. He's never going to undress somebody. He's never going to throw anybody under the bus in a press conference. And sometimes everybody wants that. Like everybody's been wanting him to hold people accountable in press conferences all year. But he's never going to be that guy. Right. And we don't know what's happening behind closed doors. And it's funny because, so I heard Bart and Willie say that last night, which was essentially like, it's not on coaching. I know everybody thinks it is, but like they're coached to not get flagged. Right. And they know the rules. And at the end of the day, the players have to not get flagged. And then I heard Saleh on the radio today say, basically he was getting, pinned to the wall about like, are you not holding these guys accountable? And he gave a typical kind of non-answer where he refused to reveal anything, but he said something about there's a needle in that haystack, right? And you got to go find it. And so the guys on the radio, after a few minutes, they looked through the play log. They realized that at one point, Michael Carter got flagged, made a mistake, and he was never seen from again last night. And I never noticed it live. I definitely didn't pick it up live. And, so like, I want to say, it's a badly coached team. And there's a lot of evidence that it's a poorly coached team. And my gut reaction is to say, when you're getting flagged, it's a poorly coached team. But there's that unknown element of we don't know what's happening behind closed doors. And thus far, I don't think we have seen people be held accountable either out in the open or behind closed doors. Last night, it seems like Michael Carter was. I'd like to see more. Like CJ Uzama should not see the field for a little while, etc. So I hate to give kind of a non-answer on that, but I think these guys just have to stop getting flagged.
It's interesting that you point to like Saleh saying, "Oh, there's a needle in a haystack," and like the Michael Carter splits, because I get that, maybe he was made an example of, but it's kind of easy to do that to your third string running back, It's really
point.
easy for him to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm holding these guys accountable." But like, are you really, when you have, a rookie tight end who could be producing more and another guy in Tyler Conklin, and, you're still running out people who get penalties time after time again? I don't know.
And also it's not uniform, right? Because Garrett Wilson gets into a jawing match with Asante Samuel last week and then gets flagged for clipping him on the next play because he got wrapped up in his emotions. And you're not going to do that to him, right? So to your point, like it's easy to do that to your third down back who stinks, but are you going to do it to everybody? And if you're not, then what is it worth?
And to be fair, I think if Garrett Wilson got a penalty and Robert Saleh took him out for a couple plays and like the Jets couldn't move the ball, like that would be a disastrous coaching decision. So like, I don't necessarily think that like, oh, if you're, I do think the discipline level could be different for like, if you're a third string guy who commits a penalty versus like, if you're a star player and you commit a penalty, like, you're not going to be taken off the field. But what is the system for holding people accountable so that this shit doesn't happen? Because the Jets are absolutely killing themselves over it.
Right.
And so you brought up the coaching. I want to get into coaching a little bit. Joe said this on the pod last night, and I think he kind of summed it up perfectly. Where like the second that Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles, like Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, I don't know if it was an actual agreement, but basically the way they're acting is like nothing will happen to them this year. And we were talking about this before we recorded. The way the organization is set up with Aaron Rodgers and his dead cap hit and his contract and his ability to just threaten to retire at will, no one's going anywhere. They're not rocking the boat next year. And so I think for all the people who are calling for, and I don't think you're going to fire the coach and let Joe Douglas pick a new coach when Joe Douglas could be on the hot seat next year, because then you're getting yourself into like an Idzik, Todd Bowles, McCagnon type situation all over again. So from a pragmatic standpoint, nothing is happening with the front office for the next year at least. However, when you take a look at their records, and I'll shout out my guy Cali Jets, who I met last night at the Raiders game for the first time. Mike McCagnon was 24-40 with 37.5 winning percentage overall in his tenure as GM. Joe Douglas is currently 24-51 with a 32% winning percentage overall in his tenure so far. Todd Bowles as head coach, same record as McCagnon, 24-40, 37.5 winning percentage. Robert Saleh, through his tenure as Jets coach, 34.8% so far. So I understand that these guys are likely not going to be moved on from because of Rodgers as a factor. But if you take Rodgers out of it, do you think, all things being equal, these guys deserve to keep their jobs right now with their performance?
God, it's an interesting question, because if you don't know them and you never saw a press conference and you never, you had no background except those numbers,